I walked into the boardroom expecting another status update, nothing more. But before I could even sit, the CEO's son, Ethan Caldwell, stood up in front of everyone and announced, "Her project can be outsourced for half the cost." His voice hit the room like a verdict. Several board members shifted in their seats, already half convinced. Ethan turned toward me with a slow, satisfied smile, the kind a man gives when he believes the checkmate is already on the table. I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. I opened my folder, took out the resignation letter I had signed that morning, and held it up so the entire board could see. Ethan's smile grew wider, as if my silence confirmed his brilliance. Then the senior company lawyer rose so quickly his chair scraped the floor. He leaned toward the founder, face drained, and whispered, "Do not tell me she just quit." The room stilled. Ethan's smile faltered. Someone exhaled sharply, and I let the silence hold for one last beat before everything shifted. 48 hours earlier, none of this was even a thought in my mind. I was still Ratih Sasmita, operations lead at Pioneer Tech Solutions in Portland, Oregon, a woman who had held our largest logistics account together through wildfires, market crashes, and more overnight calls than I could count. My team depended on me. The client trusted me. The company survived because I did the work no one else wanted to understand. Back then, I believed all of it still meant something. I was finishing a call with the client when Jake, my senior analyst, stopped outside my office door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, sounding uneasy. I muted the line. "What's going on?" "I heard something." He said, "About the board. About Ethan. I thought you should know." His voice caught, and something inside me tightened. I told the client I would call back shortly, then turned to Jake fully. "Start from the beginning," I said. He did, and the first sentence he spoke was the one that set everything else in motion. Jake's warning stayed with me long after he left my doorway. I tried to push it aside, but the day offered no room for that. The client in Tacoma needed a revised routing plan. The vendor in Sacramento needed clarification on a compliance change, and my analysts were already pinging me with 3 different crises. This was my life at Pioneer Tech Solutions. I held the West Coast logistics account that brought in $15 million a year, and everyone knew the client insisted on my oversight. I had kept them stable during a recession that nearly choked the entire sector. I had taken calls at 2 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, sometimes without sleeping at all. By the time I finished a call with the client's director of operations, my throat was raw. I stepped out to refill my water when Marissa from Customer Success approached me with a look that didn't match her usual brightness. "Ratih," she murmured, glancing over her shoulder. "Can we talk for a second?" I nodded. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Someone from the board reached out to our department last night. They wanted numbers. Very specific ones. Your numbers. My performance metrics. Not just that, they asked how often the client requests you by name. They asked who could take over your responsibilities if needed. A tight pressure built under my ribs. Did they say why no?" she whispered, but the questions felt pointed. "I thought you should know before anything blindsides you." I thanked her quietly. Marissa squeezed my arm once before heading back to her desk, moving as if she had not said anything at all. I returned to my office and stared at the chain of emails waiting for me. Every crisis, every success, every ordinary task, each one was anchored to me. If the board wanted to pull me out, they knew exactly what would unravel. I reopened Jake's earlier message and read it again, letting the weight settle. What he had heard suddenly made much more sense. Ethan Caldwell arrived in Portland like he owned every hallway he walked through. I heard he had come from San Diego after hopping through 3 startups in 4 years, each one collapsing under untapped potential he insisted was someone else's fault. The moment he stepped into Pioneer Tech Solutions, the CEO introduced him as the new Vice President of Strategy, here to modernize and cut costs. He shook my hand on his first day. "You're Ratih," he said, as if he already knew the ending of my story. "I have heard you basically run this place." I run the West Coast account, I corrected. He smiled in that loose, confident way men use when they think the rest of us are slow. We are going to make everything leaner, faster. This place is full of legacy processes. 2 days later, he removed me from the weekly client sync without a word. I found out only because my analyst asked why Ethan had taken my slot. When I confronted him, he shrugged. I want to set the tone. You can listen to the recording. The next blow came when he rewrote my project brief, replacing half the risk mitigation plan with vague promises of offshore efficiency. I stood in his doorway, holding the altered document. You changed the core structure. I said, I improved it. He replied, trust me. Ratih, you are good, but the industry is moving. We have to move too. By the end of the week, quiet whispers reached me from 3 different departments. Ethan was telling people I was outdated, resistant, replaceable. The CEO did nothing to stop him, and the board seemed eager for someone new to promise miracles. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, an internal memo landed in my inbox by mistake. It was brief but clear. Outsourcing Ratih's project could cut costs by half. Board leaning supportive. I read it twice, feeling the air fold in on itself. Ethan had not just arrived to prove himself. He had arrived to erase me. Ethan announced his outsourcing pilot on a Tuesday morning, speaking as if the decision had been unanimously approved. The offshore team is already live, he said. They will handle the routing data starting tonight. I stared at him. They have not completed a single integration test. They will learn, he replied, brushing me off. Speed over hesitation. That night, my phone lit up before dawn. Jake's voice was tight. Ratih, the routing file is wrong. Tacoma is about to shut down the night shift. They cannot unload anything because the freight numbers do not match. I called the vendor myself. The representative sounded confused. We thought column 16 was optional. He said, it controls the entire sequence. I snapped. You redirected 3 shipments to the wrong facility. By mid-morning, the client demanded an emergency call. Their director spoke without preamble. Where is Ratih? He asked. We want her on every call until this is fixed. Ethan slid into the conference room a moment later, smiling as if the crisis were a minor inconvenience. I explained the errors, line by line, showing the missing fields, the duplicated entries, the timestamps that made no sense. He nodded politely and then said, You are overreacting. This is normal ramp-up friction. The warehouse nearly shut down, I replied. And that is exactly why we outsource, he said, so we do not burn out staff who cannot adapt. I felt Jake stiffen beside me. By evening, I learned Ethan had already spoken to the board. According to a colleague, he framed my documented warnings as obstruction and my concern for the client as ego-driven resistance. The board had listened. They were tired of financial pressure and eager for someone to promise a cheaper path forward. I printed the error log and placed it in my drawer, knowing the cracks were widening. The memo about outsourcing stayed open on my screen long after everyone else had gone home. I closed it only when my eyes landed on a folder I had not touched in years. West Coast contract. 2020. Something pushed me to open it. Something heavier than anger and sharper than fear. I scrolled until a single paragraph caught the light in my mind. There it was, the key person clause. My name written in full Ratih Sasmita. Tish. If I resigned voluntarily, the client held the right to terminate the agreement immediately with no penalty. Not a delay, not negotiations, immediate. A memory broke through the wildfires of 2020, choking the sky orange. Trucks stranded on the interstate. Supply chains collapsing. I had worked 3 days straight in my apartment, guiding the client through reroutes and emergency storage. When the crisis finally settled, their director told me quietly, "If you leave this project, we leave your company, put it in writing." Legal had hesitated back then, but the client insisted the clause was added, stamped, and filed in a forgotten archive. No one brought it up after that. The company survived because I stayed. Now I saw the problem. Ethan had been using a condensed contract summary for the board, a version scrubbed of every nuance. The key person clause was not included. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown internal number. I am in legal. The sender wrote, I warned Ethan about the clause. He ignored me. I thought you should know. I typed back. Why tell me a pause? Then, because they are about to make a decision without understanding the consequence. I rested my hand on the printed page. My name sat there like a fault line waiting to break. If they truly believed I was replaceable, they had forgotten the one clause that proved otherwise. The emergency board session was scheduled for 8 in the morning, and no one bothered to invite me. Jake forwarded the calendar notice anyway, whispering, They think you will not see this. I thanked him and stayed at my desk, headphones around my neck, waiting for the outcome I already sensed forming. At 8:05, Ethan began presenting. I knew because one of the analysts in the room texted me a single line. He is already talking. 5 minutes later, another message arrived, this time a photo of his slide deck. Half the cost. The first slide declared, modernize. The next said, bright blue letters glowing under the conference lights, then legacy risks. And finally, Ratih's resistance equals financial drain. I read the last line twice. A moment later, my phone buzzed again. Board member unknown number. Is this accurate? He is telling us you refuse to implement the new model? I typed quickly. I documented the risks he ignored. Ask legal for the full record. No response. Another message came from the same number a few minutes later. You should be here. Something is off. That was the moment it clicked. They were discussing me the way executives discuss contracts or property, something they could vote on, shift around, replace. I pictured Ethan in the boardroom, hands moving confidently as he described me as a barrier to profit. The CEO would be seated next to him, shoulders already sagging under investor pressure, nodding at all the right moments. I could almost hear Ethan's voice through the walls. We free ourselves from legacy dependence, he would say. We streamline. We cut costs by half. My jaw tightened. They were one step from approving my termination, believing they held the upper hand. I closed my laptop and rested my palms on the desk. If they were ready to end my role without me present, then they had forgotten the most important truth. I was not powerless, and I was not done. The morning after the emergency session, I shut my office door and began preparing for the only outcome they had left me. I backed up every document tied to the West Coast account routing models, escalation logs, contract amendments, vendor audits. Each file was a piece of the truth they kept refusing to see. Next, I opened the original 2020 contract, the one with the key person clause naming me directly. I uploaded it to the secure legal archive and added a quiet note. Full version, executed copy. No accusations, no explanations. Just the facts they had ignored. By noon, I drafted my resignation letter. My name looked strangely calm above the signature line. A soft knock sounded at my door. HR's representative, Dana, stepped in with a neutral smile. Ratih, I heard you requested a review of the client agreement. Is there something you need clarity on? Yes, I said. Please ensure the board reads the complete contract, not the summaries. It affects their decisions. Her smile shifted. Too practiced to be genuine. I will pass that along. But an hour later, I overheard her speaking to someone in the hallway. Ethan said to leave it. They have enough to worry about. I sat back down and stared at my letter. The room felt unbearably still. My phone rang. It was the client's director of operations, I answered, and he didn't bother with greetings. Is it true, he asked? Are they pushing you out? They are considering a transition, I replied carefully. His voice hardened. If you ever leave Pioneer Tech, we are gone the same day. You carried us through disaster. Ratih, we will not continue without you. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of his words. The pressure around me had been building for weeks, but now it had shaped a direction, a boundary, and a path I no longer feared. The board meeting unfolded exactly as I knew it would. Ethan stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, the picture of confident reform. We are ready to present the transition plan. he announced. "Once we finalize termination, we can shift the entire project offshore for half the cost." A board member nodded. Another scribbled notes. The CEO sat motionless, eyes unfocused, letting his son lead the performance. Ethan pressed the advantage. "Ratih's resistance has slowed innovation. We cannot afford legacy thinking any longer. The numbers are clear." I stepped into the room then, calm and silent. Ethan turned to me with a thin smile. "Ratih, you are just in time," he said. "We were discussing the next phase without you." "I know," I replied. "That is why I am here." I reached into my folder and lifted the resignation letter I had signed 2 days earlier. I held it up at shoulder height, angled so the signatures and timestamps were visible for a heartbeat. Ethan's smile widened. He thought I was surrendering. Across the table, the senior company lawyer suddenly rose, his face draining of color. He looked at the founder and whispered urgently, "Do not tell me she just quit." The room froze. The CEO blinked. A board member half stood from her chair. Ethan frowned, confused by the sudden shift in energy. The lawyer stepped forward and addressed the board. "Her resignation triggers the key person clause in the West Coast Agreement. If she leaves voluntarily, the client has the right to terminate the entire $15 million contract immediately." A stunned silence followed. Ethan stared at me now, the confidence slipping from his face inch by inch. The board members exchanged looks of dawning panic. The CEO inhaled sharply, as if waking from a long sleep. I lowered the resignation letter and placed it on the table. The truth had landed exactly where it needed to. The termination notice arrived before noon, a single-page document from the client's legal team, sent to every senior leader at Pioneer Tech. The subject line was "Blunt activation of key person clause, immediate contract exit." Within minutes, my phone vibrated non-stop. Jake messaged first. "They are losing their minds." "The client is gone." Upstairs, the board convened in a panic. I heard raised voices from the hallway. An investor joined via speakerphone and demanded answers. "How did you allow a $15 million contract to hang on one person?" he asked sharply. "And who authorized a transition without reviewing the original agreement?" HR attempted to defend themselves, but Dana eventually broke. "We were warned," she admitted quietly. "Ratih notified us. We deferred to Ethan." Ethan slammed his notebook shut. "She sabotaged the project." He insisted. "This proves why she had to go." The senior company lawyer cut him off. "Your cost-cutting model was based on incomplete documentation." He said, "You withheld key contractual information from the board. This is negligence, not innovation." The CEO pressed his palms to his eyes, saying nothing while the room fractured around him. By afternoon, LinkedIn hummed with half-formed rumors about Pioneer Tech's sudden collapse. A Portland tech blog posted a short article titled "Boardroom Misstep Costs Company Millions." Comments followed within an hour. Before sunset, a board assistant approached Ethan and said, "The directors are requesting your badge." He froze, waiting for someone to contradict her, but no one did. He handed it over without a word. An hour later, the CEO stepped back from operational control, his resignation under review. As for me, I received 3 messages from 3 different companies, all job offers, all within 48 hours. I closed my laptop and exhaled slowly, the weight of the day settling into something steady, deliberate, and mine to carry forward. 3 weeks after I walked out of Pioneer Tech, I unlocked the glass door of my new office on Portland's industrial east side. The building was small, the lighting a little uneven, and the desks mismatched, but every person here asked before making changes, and every conversation felt like it came from people who understood what the work actually meant. On my first day, the founder of the firm shook my hand and said, "You tell us what you need. Ratih, we hired you for a reason, no bravado, no politics, just trust." By the end of the second week, We had reworked 2 routing paths, saved a regional partner nearly $200,000 in missed freight fees, and started building a training framework my old company never bothered to fund. My team listened when I spoke, and they challenged me when they should. It felt like oxygen. On the 3rd Monday morning, a receptionist walked into my office holding a plain envelope. "This was dropped off for you," she said. No name. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once down the middle. Only one sentence filled the page. "Thank you for reminding us that loyalty has value. We forgot." You didn't. No signature. No initials. No hint of who had written it. Could have been a board member. Someone from legal. Maybe someone who finally saw what Ethan never understood. I closed the letter, ran a thumb along the fold, and set it quietly in the top drawer of my desk. Not a trophy, not a warning, just a reminder of the line I refused to cross. Even when they push me toward it, processes can be copied, labor can be outsourced, but integrity once lost never comes back. I shut the drawer and turned back to the work waiting for me, steady in the knowledge that the people who once believed I was replaceable had finally learned the truth.